Welcome back. This is episode 2 of my story, and I'm just going to start reading from where I left off from episode 1. Yeah, here we go. From the time I was 11 or so to the day my father died, I remember very little interaction with him. There were sporadic phone calls when court dates were approaching for child support. I vaguely remember going to Stanley's ice cream with him once or twice. There were never Christmas or birthday phone calls, never mind cards or gifts. I remember thinking to myself that I had not spoken to him in 2 years when he had died. I truly don't remember my father ever telling me that he loved me. I do remember the day he died very well. It was 6 weeks before our 15th birthday. My mother was working a night shift. I was out with friends. I can't recall with who, but I know I had smoked marijuana. I had a curfew, and I remember I was happy I was home on time. I walked in the house and rushed to the phone. I don't know if I called him or if he called me, but I was talking to Joe. When I walked in the house, my brother was speaking to 2 men. The men were dressed relaxed, white collar, sports coats, and slacks. I didn't really think anything of it because they or my brother didn't say anything to me when I walked in. I was on the phone, and I hear them talking about an accident, so I moved the receiver away from my mouth and said, "What are you guys talking about?" One of the gentlemen turned towards me and said, "Your father died in a car accident at 7 o'clock this evening." I put the receiver back to my mouth and I said, "My dad's dead. I gotta go." And I hung up the phone. I walked towards the 2 men and my brother, and I said, "What?" And they explained to me that him and another cop were involved in a high-speed chase, and they had hit a tree, and both my father and the other officer had died in the accident. I was in shock, and I didn't know what or how to feel. My initial reaction, I laughed and said, "Oh my God," repeatedly. I went upstairs to my room. I was pacing on my bed, which was against the wall. I was angry, I was hurt, I was upset. Then it hit me that I would never have the chance to talk to him, to tell him how I felt, to find out if he had ever loved me. I turned to the corner of the room and I cried. I cried hard and long. I wanted him to love me so bad. I was so angry. I was mad at him for being dead. I felt like a stranger at his funeral. I knew hardly anyone there. The only one who comforted us was the priest from the church we went to when we were young. My mother did not attend. The facts of the accident are: my father was at the station, and Sergeant DeCross asked him if he wanted to patrol with him. He didn't have to, he wanted to. They got a call of a 16-year-old in a stolen vehicle. They were chasing the subject at high speed. He turned a corner, and they tried to pursue. They hit a tree. DeCross died instantly, and my father died shortly after. Both officers had closed caskets. The car was mangled. The kid they were chasing was this kid, Paul. He was a drug addict at the time, and he got community service for the charges. He was a minor. I ran into him at a party years later. Everyone was freaking out like I was going to kill him or something. I know he didn't intend to kill anyone, and I told him that. However, after that I felt a little too weird, so I left. The funeral was massive, hundreds and hundreds of police officers. It was like a parade. At the wake, the funeral caretakers cleared the room with just the immediate family in the room, with my father's body. I guess my father wanted Knockin' on Heaven's Door by Bob Dylan to be played at his wake. Gail was bullshit because she wanted it to be played with everyone in the funeral home. The song brought me to instant tears. I remember picturing in my head my father knocking on the top of the casket trying to get out like he was still alive. The caretakers then said that my father looked swollen and different. However, if the family wanted to view the body, they could. I wanted to so badly. I needed closure. I needed to know it was real. But Gail wouldn't allow it. She said that it would be better for me to remember him like the old picture of him beside his casket. I argued, but my brother and sister motioned to me to let it go. Shortly after his funeral, I was walking downstairs at my house, and there was a radio playing in the dining room, which is where I was informed of his death. As I walked down the stairs, Knocking on Heaven's Door by Guns N' Roses came on. It was the first time that I had heard it by Guns N' Roses. I turned the radio up as loud as it could go, dropped down to my knees, and cried. Ever since that day, every time I heard that song, I thought of my father. Sometimes I even felt his presence. Another song that brought me to tears and portrays how I feel immensely towards him is Cemetery Gates by Pantera. Listen to it if you ever get the chance. My father's death symbolized so much in my life. My life as I knew it would change tragically after he died. Let me give you all a little more background before I go there. I wrote about all my mother's boyfriends, but there's only one that's really important. So I'm just going to start with this because she was with him when my father died. Okay. Okay. Let the PTSD begin. Ike slithers into my mother's life. My mom went out partying a lot. She liked to go to Vincent's and Tino's, both were nightclubs in Randolph. The first time she mentioned him, she said his name was Travis. When she mentioned him again, his name was Ike. If him lying about his name isn't a sign, then I don't know what is. Anyways. My mother was to have him over the house to meet us. He was bringing pizza. We were 15 years old, and this guy walks in with a couple of pizzas with everything on them. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know any kids who like veggies and everything else under the sun on their pizza. It was apparent that he did not have much interaction with kids before. Now, let me describe this monster to y'all. He was tall, 5'10" or so, dressed decently, with way too much cologne on. He had a rounded face with a thin beard line and mustache. Black hair. He had black hair that was combed neatly to one side, an inch or two on top, and neatly short in the sides. He had evil blackened eyes as a gateway to his demonic soul. He was creepy. My sister and I were dating now, and we had caused my mother reason for concern. My sister was dating Tony, and he was... Oh, boy. I guess this is therapy. Bearing your soul publicly. He was older than her, and she was madly in love with him. This guy was bad for my sister. She would defy my mother to be with him. He took her virginity and had no respect for my mother. He was bad and bad for her. My mom would have shot him if she had the chance. I lost my virginity to Chuck. He was a senior and I was a freshman. It happened in a closet with a cot in it at a friend's house one day after school. I was really nervous. He was begging and made it seem like it was no big deal. He put the condom on and put it in, and it was over in 2 minutes. It hurt, and I kept asking him to stop, but it was over before I got real upset or uncomfortable. After, I was like, that's it? What the fuck? Not very glamorous, I know, but it is what it is. Shortly after that, I had found out that he had a long-term girlfriend, and I was the other girl. I wasn't devastated. I was bullshit angry. I felt cheap and dumb, and I hated him for pursuing me and taking something he had no right to. Then I started hanging out with my sister and Tony, and I met Al. I liked him. He was older, good-looking. He had a car, and he kissed passionately. Unfortunately, he was very aggressive, and one evening, when him and Tony were at my house, he forced himself on me, and Tony forced himself on my sister. So pretty much by now, I have learned that men are only interested in one thing. Then I started dating Ricky. I really loved him. He was my age, bad boy, good-looking, masculine, and we had a lot in common. His parents were divorced, he didn't have a lot of money, and he adored me. We were sexually active, and we used condoms. I don't know how it happened, but I got pregnant. Around the same time, my sister had gotten her first tattoo. My sister and I were upstairs and decided to go tell my mother our secrets. So we went downstairs and said, Mom, we have something to tell you. My sister said, I got a tattoo. And I said, I'm pregnant. Well, she didn't even flinch at the tattoo. She lost it on me. What do you mean you're pregnant? There was a lot of swearing and disappointment. I did a lot of crying. I told her I wanted to have the baby, and she told me every reason on earth not to. Why not to? When it came down to the harsh truth, she told me that if I decided to have the baby, that she would kick me out and give me no help. The next day I told her I would have the abortion, figuring I had no choice. I had already told Ricky that I was pregnant. I was so devastated. I remember holding my stomach, wanting unconditional love, someone to love me. I thought it was my chance to be significant. I needed a reason to live, and I thought that this was my reason. My mother forbade me to see Ricky. I can't remember if I found out before or after the abortion that he had cheated on me with a real sleazy girl. I want to say it was during all my anguish. I didn't tell him I was getting an abortion. I wouldn't have been able to handle any criticism. I was emotionally unstable, having thoughts of suicide. In 2003, I wrote an essay about the actual procedure, and here it is. So, in 2003, I attempted to go to college, but I was in an abusive relationship at the time, and it didn't last. But I was in, it was English Comp 1, and narrative descriptive, life and death situations. So I wrote about this. I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to stop there. Yeah, I think that's enough information for one video. Okay. When I was only 15 years old, I was faced with a life and death situation. I got pregnant. I was scared, confused, and didn't realize the impact I was going to put on my life with the decision I was going to make, or rather going to be pushed into making. An abortion was the decision to be made in the best interest of all parties involved. But was it? I was rushed into making a decision on something I didn't understand and was not ready to make. My decision in that situation still dreadfully impacts my life and me today. My mother went with me to the clinic. There were people outside calling me a whore and a murderer. I was still all right, though. I thought I was doing the right thing. I knew I had disappointed my mother, and by going through with the abortion, I would ease her stress and make her happy. That made me feel all right with the situation. Waiting in the waiting room was a little difficult because that was where I realized that there was an actual life inside my body, my baby. Then the time came for the procedure. I was scared, and it was painful. Yes, they gave me drugs to ease the pain, but I still felt a severe cramping and scraping sensation I'll never forget. After 3 weeks of utter confusion and fear, it was gone. Death of that unborn child became a part of my soul. I woke up in the recovery room about 30 minutes later, still fuzzy from the medication they had given me. I still felt pain, and I was not right emotionally. Little did I know that the physical pain would be the easy part of it all. When I got home, I was angry with everyone, my mother, my boyfriend, myself. I didn't even really know why I was so angry. I was hurting physically and emotionally. That night, while I slept, my conscience would never let me sleep sound again for at least a year to come. I had a nightmare. I dreamt of a little boy named Anthony, holding his arms out, crying, "Mommy, don't kill me. Please, Mommy, don't kill me." I woke up in a pool of sweat, crying hysterically. I had this dream sporadically, reminding me of what I had done. My carelessness had cost me my innocence of adolescence, my innocence of the severity of death, and gave me one of the greatest pains I had and will ever have encountered. One mistake, one decision, 2 lives, life and death. I had damaged myself forever at 15 years old. I now knew what real pain was and how it felt to be truly ashamed of myself. Before that day, I knew pain only skin deep. Sorry. Until that day, I was a child. Until that day, I dreamt careless dreams. Until that day, I trusted my world. Until that day, I had a choice between life and death. My life as I knew it was no more, and death was so real. After that day, I learned what a conscience was. I had to deal with my conscience and still do to this day. I had my first child when I was 21. I named him Michael Anthony. To this day, I remember those dreams better than any other memory, good or bad. And that's all still true. It's all still true. Actually, I'll just finish the whole Ricky thing. All right. When I got home while recovering, I called Ricky and told him. He came to my house, walked up the stairs, and begged to comfort me. I was so angry at the world. I told him I hated him, and I kicked and punched him down the stairs as hard as I could. I cried uncontrollably for days followed by the nightmares. When I returned to school, Ricky's mother was waiting for me and walked into the school, waiting for me to walk into the school. In the parking lot, she got out of her car and screaming at me, calling me names, saying I should have had the baby and let her raise him or her. She displayed my shredded soul for everyone to see. I don't think I went back to school that year. That's a great place to stop because the next part really sets in my damage. I will do a reflection video soon to talk about everything I just read. Please comment, subscribe, like. Let me know what you think.